Michael, I just read out a statement there to the effect that you say Lufthansa always puts its hand in the German government's pocket and you are going to appeal this 9 billion, what you call bailout. Where will you appeal it to? The European Court of Justice?
Yeah, Vonnie, we have to wait until the European Commission approves the state aid payable by the German government to Lufthansa. There'll also be state aid from the Swiss government, the Austrian government and the Belgian government, all to Lufthansa Group, which is running around Europe hoovering up state aid like a drunken uncle at the end of a wedding. And we will be opposing all of these, what we consider are illegal state aid measures. I mean, we have companies like Ryanair, EasyJet, BA, we all compete with Lufthansa in the German market. Lufthansa is receiving enormous payroll support from the German government. And then on top of that, they need another 9 billion, which they can't really justify, but it allows them then, it funds them being able to sell below-cost ticket prices for the next 5 or 6 years, or to buy up even more competitors in the German market for the next 5 or 6 years with these state aid subsidies.
I do want to point out that I got in touch with a Lufthansa spokesman this morning and he wrote, "We will not comment on Mr. O'Leary's statements." So no comment there from Lufthansa. But Michael, are you reworking?
They can't even they won't even defend it, Vonnie. You know, they're too embarrassed to be hoovering up all of these state subsidies.
Well, I won't make an interpretation, but very happy that you feel like doing so. Are you reworking your plans for Germany, Michael, in light of this bailout? Would you, for example, take on extra slots, or will you be getting out of Germany completely?
No, I mean, I think like we know in Ryanair and our subsidiary Laudamotion, which has big bases in Stuttgart and Düsseldorf, we'll continue to compete with Lufthansa. The difficulty is for us, for EasyJet and for the other airlines who are trying to compete in the German market. We don't receive state aid. We don't receive bailouts every time something goes wrong. But it's grossly unfair under the European rules that we now face competition for the next 5 or 6 years with Lufthansa, who have, filled their satchels with 9 billion euros worth of state aid, trying to dump all over us.
Isn't this, though, isn't there a tacit understanding, Michael, that those rules aren't seriously in existence to create a level playing field, level competition? This isn't that kind of industry, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have an Alitalia, you wouldn't have a Deutsche Lufthansa, you might not have a British Airways and an Iberia. Countries need to have their national airlines for security reasons, for economic reasons, and for employment reasons.
But Matt, it's a good point, but it's completely untrue. BA, and we use the example of BA, are not receiving any state aid from the UK government, not even applying for state aid, nor is EasyJet, nor is Ryanair. Ryanair is the biggest airline in Europe. We can survive through this pandemic, despite the grounding. Yes, we're receiving the same payroll support as all other airlines are receiving across Europe, but that's enough. We don't need to have multi-billion subsidies showered upon us, as Lufthansa seems to need. And I think there's a bigger issue in the whole debate over state aid. Here you have the German government bailing out Lufthansa, the Dutch government bailing out KLM, and the French government bailing out Air France to the tune of 10 or 12 billion. And then they turn around and lecture all the other European countries. Oh, you must all obey by the rules. We're the good northern European countries. Because the Germans are rich, they now account for more than 55% of all the approved state aid. So it's the German government who lectures every other European Union member about complying with the rules. They're quite happy to break the rules when it suits them when it comes to Lufthansa, as are the Dutch when it comes to KLM. And these are not... the days of flag carriers are over. More people fly across Europe in low-cost carriers, Ryanair, EasyJet, and others, than fly on Lufthansa or fly on Alitalia. Ryanair is twice the size of Alitalia in Italy. The people of Italy have already chosen. They fly Ryanair. They don't fly Alitalia because it's always late and very expensive.
It seems here in Germany, at least, Michael, like Lufthansa has a domestic monopoly because there's no other choice. For example, I fly a lot. Berlin, Stuttgart, Berlin, Frankfurt, Berlin, Munich.
Yep.
And Lufthansa is, of course, the only choice. But if they were to fail, how long would it take a Ryanair to fill those domestic slots?
About a week, Matt. We have the aircraft to be able to step into those slots. And remember, Lufthansa only has a monopoly of the German domestic market because they were allowed to buy Air Berlin 2 years ago in breach of every known competition rule that exists within Europe. They were allowed to merge into a monopoly situation in the German domestic marketplace. What they did on the German domestics then was put up the fares. They deliver a third-rate service at very high prices. But they monopolize all the slots in Frankfurt, in Stuttgart, in Munich, etc., so that airlines like easyJet and Ryanair and others can't provide real choice and real competition in the German market. And then, despite the fact that they've mopped up a monopoly in Germany, when coronavirus hits, the first thing they do is turn around to the German government and say, give us 9 billion. And oh, by the way, we want 9 billion, but we also want you to sit on the board and shut up. You're not even allowed to ask a question or raise your hand. Just give us your money and be quiet, sit in the corner. That's the kind of monopoly power that Lufthansa has. And the real challenge is it distorts competition now for the next 4 or 5 years. We, Ryanair, Loud Emotion, Stuttgart and Dusseldorf, now have to try to compete against Lufthansa, who have 9 billion of ammunition in their satchel pockets to dump all over us or to, God forbid, buy up even more competitors in the German market. It's grossly unfair and it distorts competition. One of the great successes of the European Union in the last 20 years has been the deregulation of the flag carriers and opening this up to competition.
Michael, you just said to Matt that it would take you about a week to fill some of those domestic slots in Germany. You might get the opportunity if you want to take it, because we understand the EU is going to ask Lufthansa to roll back some of its slots, and particularly Munich and Frankfurt. Will you take on those slots?
But they don't, Vonnie. Like, what they actually do is they give you one slot at 5 p.m. on a Friday and a second slot at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday to arrive in, but you can only leave then at 3 o'clock on Tuesday. Like, what they do, this is a kind of they give you the impression that they're opening up slots, but the slots that they release won't be the morning slots so that you can base an aircraft there. They won't be the slots that will enable any other competitor to create a schedule. It's, the government dressing this up as, oh, we're being very tough. We're taking seats on the board, but we have to be silent partners. We'll release some slots, but the slots won't actually create a schedule. It's what they do. The Dutch came out last week and said that, we're giving KLM, a small Dutch airline, 2 billion in state aid, but they have to commit to really tough green kind of reforms. And then you ask, what's the green reform? Well, KLM have agreed to be carbon neutral by 2030, which is exactly the same carbon neutral commitment all the European airlines have made in the last year or two. So this is all just government PR. It's not serious, it's not credible, and the German government don't want any real opposition to Lufthansa in the German market. They just want to create and protect a Lufthansa monopoly that overcharges German consumers and visitors to Germany for the next 10 or 15 years. It's the consumer, the European consumer, who suffers in all this, not Lufthansa.
Right, and we're just now seeing, in fact, a red headline saying that France is pledging just over 8 billion euros to support the auto sector. So this is going to be, industry-wide and through a variety of industries, these problems. But Michael, let me ask you something a little closer to home. So apparently Ryanair owes about €1 billion to customers that have not been able to travel for the next 3 months, so April, May and June. You have said you'll try and fly from July. Are you going to be able to give those customers refunds?
Sure. We're already a quarter of the way through it. We've a total refund obligation for the government to cancel flights through April, May and June of about 1.2 billion. As of our results 2 weeks ago, we've already refunded just over 300 million. We'll be up to 400 million by the end of May. So we're working our way through what is an unprecedented backlog of refunds. The good news, though, is Ryanair's back flying across every market from the 1st of July. We're running 1,000 flights a day. European governments are lifting all the travel restrictions. And so we think actually what a lot of customers will do is simply they'll take free moves. They'll move their bookings into July, August and September, and that will help us to eliminate the backlog and provide cash refunds to those few remaining customers who want cash refunds. But, all airlines in Europe are dealing with a historic backlog of refunds because of these government-imposed flight groundings.
Michael, I got to say, my wife just flew from Spain to Berlin after being stuck there for a couple of months. She flew on Lufthansa because she couldn't get a Ryanair flight. It was shoulder to shoulder. The plane was completely sold out, and people, of course, are sneezing and coughing the entire time. Security in Frankfurt apparently very touchy-feely, not wearing masks, which I found shocking. Aren't you concerned that if we get another wave of this coronavirus, it's going to absolutely destroy the industry, bring it to a standstill right after you start up again?
And I'm sure, Max, you also paid a ludicrously high airfare for the privilege of being, flying on another delayed Lufthansa flight. No, I mean, in Ryanair, what we've said, we're going back flying on the 1st of July, 1,000 flights a day. But every passenger on board is required to wear a mask. All our crews, cabin crew will wear masks. And we expect our airports to require all passengers. The airlines in Asia have demonstrated over the last 2 or 3 months that as long as you make mask wearing mandatory in airports, in train stations and on aircraft, actually you effectively eliminate the spread of COVID-19. And I think, the Lufthansa flights and certainly airport security in Frankfurt should be wearing masks. It is the way to allow air travel to return while minimizing the risk of spread of COVID-19. But all of the evidence in Asia, Matt, suggests that there isn't a second wave coming as long as we all make masks mandatory.
I want to ask, Michael, because you're, infamously blunt. I mean, you're a man who says it like it is. And we hear all of this talk from airline bosses as if, it's such an incredible air filtration system on the plane. But in reality, everybody gets sick after flying in planes, right? I mean, how are you going to stop the spread of a virus? Nobody gets a cold when you go to the supermarket or when you go to the office. It happens when you travel. How do you stop the spread of a virus in that kind of environment?
Well, firstly, Matt, I think you've got to travel more on Ryanair. You're clearly referring to your past flight experience with Lufthansa. Nobody gets sick traveling on Ryanair flights. They're so delighted with the low fares and the on-time services. I think the way we eliminate the risk of, viral infections on planes is everybody wears masks. The mask, if everybody's wearing masks, you reduce the risk of the spread of COVID and any other droplets by about 90%. It is the way forward. Yes, we'll use hand sanitizers. Yes, everybody will be observing some social distancing. But social distancing is impossible in airports, in train stations, and on board aircraft. And that's why we are going back flying in Ryanair on the 1st of July, 1,000 or 2,000 routes across Europe. But everybody, our cabin crew and our passengers will all be wearing masks or you won't be allowed on board.
The European Transport Commissioner told us last week that most of these airlines have, quote, military-grade air conditioning systems, Michael. So I presume that's the case with you too. Talk to us about the return to air of the Max, the Boeing Max. When do you anticipate it now?
Well, I mean, we're much more optimistic, Vonnie. I think Boeing have been keeping us fully updated. We're in active dialogue with EASA, the European Air Safety Agency. We think that the test flights will take place in America sometime in July. And I think we're reasonably confident now that the aircraft will return to service, probably in North America in September, late September, early October. We now believe we will receive our first delivery of MAX aircraft this side of Christmas. We have 135 firm orders with about 75 option aircraft. They're about 12 months late. But I think we're pretty confident now that the MAX will return to service in North America in Q3 and that we'll get our first deliveries of these aircraft in Q4. And we're really excited by these aircraft. They offer 4% more seats but consume 16% less fuel. And they're going to be I think it's one of the critical opportunities for Ryanair in the next number of years. We've seen airlines go bust, Thomas Cook, Flybe and others. Yes, Lufthansa and the others will be bailed out. But the best way we can respond to that is, great new aircraft that offer us lower costs and will allow us to pass on lower fares to our customers all across Europe, including Matt and his wife, who will now be flying in future with us from Germany to Spain on Ryanair and not on that nasty subsidised German airline.
Well, and another little member of the family, as I understand it, too, very soon. Michael, very last question, and we're out of time. But I do want to ask you, will anybody be joining you in these actions? Will Ryanair have any airline partners going up in various jurisdictions in the courts?
I'm very sure we will, but I think that the best message is, we don't want to do a collective action or a class action. These legal cases are much better off handled if, each airline is challenging the European Union, on their own behalf. So I'd be reasonably confident, certainly in Germany, that EasyJet will also be challenging this state aid, which, threatens EasyJet's survival in a number of German bases. Like EasyJet have a large base in Berlin that's loss-making. Now it has to compete with Lufthansa receiving $9 billion of state aid from the German government, and EasyJet is receiving not a penny. Like, it's manifestly unfair, that the efficient airlines entering this COVID crisis, like Ryanair, like EasyJet, like BA, will emerge out of this crisis in many ways weaker, because Lufthansa is hoovering up $12 billion of state aid, and Air France-KLM will get $10 billion of state aid in Alitalia. An airline that's never made money in 75 years will emerge with another $3 billion of state aid. It's clearly unfair, and it's in breach of the EU competition rules and also the state aid rules.